Thanks so much. Good evening and welcome to our parent education session this evening, the impact of digital and social media on children. My name is Nicholas Ziefel. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at the Contra Costa County Office of Education, and I'm thrilled to be with you here tonight to discuss an important topic. As we all know, technology has revolutionized the way that we live our lives. And our children's generations are growing up in a world that is vastly different than the one that we experienced as kids. This proliferation of digital and social media has created a complex landscape that is so full of opportunity and it's so full of challenges. As parents and as an educational system, we have a responsibility to help our children navigate this new and ever-changing terrain. Over the next hour or so, we'll be diving into this complex topic and exploring how we can best support our students in the digital era. We'll start by providing a broad context of the digital landscape, looking at the benefits and the risks that come with our students' increased engagement with technology. And then we'll move on to provide you some practical resources and strategies that you can use to support your children's healthy use of technology. Jamie, would you go to the next slide? Again, for those of you who would benefit from it, on the screen, there's instructions on how to access both closed captioning and automatic language translation. Basically, there's a button on the bottom of the screen that says CC. You can click on it, and then you have options for language translation in about 20 different languages. Next slide, thanks. Before I move on to introduce tonight's speakers, I'd like to invite our Contra Costa County Superintendent of Schools, Lynn Mackey, to say a few words and to welcome everyone this evening. Lynn.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you everybody for joining us today. This is such an important topic to me. As a parent, a grandparent, an educator, I always have so many questions on how to really balance that fine line of how to teach and support the use of, and where part of me wants to, when I, with my grandson, just want to take all the technology away. And how do we, I'm so happy to have both common sense and to have COPE here, as well as the school district. Some just parenting techniques, I'm never sure of how to navigate with my 7-year-old grandson when he almost sometimes seems addicted to some of this, especially when I am too, right? In all honesty, we all have our issues with social media or just playing on our phones. So this is such an important topic, and we want to be able to use it as a tool, as a healthy tool. So thank you, Nick, for bringing this together. Thank you, Steve Bateman, and all of our technology support for putting this on tonight, and take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. So later in the night, we'll be hearing from two amazing community partners. As Lynn said, Sabrina Robertson's here from the COPE Family Support Organization, and Lori Roberts is here from the West Contra Costa Unified School District. Again, thanks so much to these organizations for their commitment to supporting families in our community and for their willingness to share their expertise with us tonight. Next slide, please. Ultimately, our goal for tonight is to help you feel more informed, more empowered, and more confident as you navigate the digital world with your children. We're so fortunate to have Jamie Nunez to act as our MC for the evening. He's the Western Region Manager at Common Sense and supports educators, students, and parents in addressing digital wellness. As a former high school teacher, school administrator, and education center director, Jamie has trained thousands of families on student engagement in digital spaces, from TED Talks on student identity in online spaces to statewide campaigns addressing cyberbullying. Jamie has 20 years of experience facilitating presentations and empowering others to create healthy and digital habits. While not working, Jamie can be found in public places, teaching his 8-year-old how to give compliments to strangers. He is such a genuine expert in this space. We're so fortunate to have him. Jamie, thanks so much for leading us this evening. And with that, I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Thank you, Superintendent Mackey. Really appreciate your words of honesty and transparency. So I'm going to lead us through a conversation. And the way we're going to do that over the next 40 minutes or so is twofold. First, I'm going to share with you some interesting landscape kind of research that you should be aware of as families. What are sort of the current trends happening in digital media? And then part B of that section is really to ask you and have you reflect on your own practices, and to consider this an opportunity in your life to reset your expectations. So if you have grandkids or if you have kids of your own, what are the unique ways in which you can think about the values as it relates to your kids or your grandkids' time online? And then the second part is really what I'm really excited about, and that is hearing from two very different perspectives, not varied per se in that they are not aligned, but varied in terms of what identity or what unique sort of point of view that they come across. The first is by lovely Sabrina Robertson, who I'll introduce shortly, who will be giving on behalf of COPE and on behalf of her experiences an understanding of what it means to support our families and support our kids using digital media. And then we're going to hear from the school, Lori Roberts, who oversees and supports West Contra Costa Unified School District. We're going to hear how schools and school districts are addressing misuse in and out of the classroom. All right, so if you're with me, hopefully I see you out there, and hopefully if you do ever see me in person, you can high five me knowing that I've changed your life, or you can curse me out for saying that that I've caused you to rethink your own digital habits. So let's get started. All right, so I think I'd like to, as I pointed out, we want to make sure that we understand the landscape. And so if I'm on the call this morning or this afternoon, this evening, I should say, what you want to take into consideration is your own digital use. What exactly are you on, and how are you modeling those behaviors for your kids? And then the second is we really want to dive deep into what exactly does it mean to address digital misuse. I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like. And then, as I pointed out, both Sabrina and Lori will be sharing their insights on what you can do to start these conversations, both at the school level as well as with at home. All right, let's get started. So let's just name a reality here. Most tech was and continues to be built without our kids in mind. And as soon as you come to the terms that this is a reality for most of our kids and most of our lives, then we begin to understand what it is that we can do for our kids to support them. But just know that most technology, social media, and digital media use is often built with a number of things in mind. That's profits, that's ensuring that your kids are the product, knowing that they may or may not be using technology in a way that aligns with your values. Right, so what exactly does that mean? How do we actually take this into the context of what's happening? The first is just a research. At Common Sense, we have a research department, and one of the things that we do is we begin to study what it is that our kids are doing when they're online. And this is the first research that came out in 2021. And I want you to sort of empathize with what our kids feel when they're online. And what they reported based on our site is that when they're feeling a sense of depression or anxiety or even stress, they will often turn to social media to make them feel better. This is sort of how they're thinking about these spaces. And the reason for that, I would imagine, is that these are the spaces where social connections are rooted in. These are the spaces where our kids are engaging to want to connect with others. It gets a little tricky after that, though. And what we see and what we continue to see is that our kids then experience, and we all know this, but they experience some very interesting things, developmentally inappropriate content. And they experience things like homophobia or sexism, and they don't know how to navigate that. So on one end, they're exposed to places where there's engagement, where their peers are at. Think of this as a mall, if you sort of ever grew up near like a mall where you go and hang out. But yet they don't know what to do when they're exposed to things that make them feel and are developmentally inappropriate. So what do they do with that? And I think one of the things that we're starting to see in the latest sort of landscape that we're seeing is that it starts to affect our kids. And we know that inherently, we know that because of so many research that's out there in terms of impact on social media. But what we don't know is what features end up really bothering our kids. And I'm going to give you one research here. This is a research that just came out on how girls really feel about social media. And I'm going to point to you, without overwhelming you with research, I'm going to point to you two very interesting sort of findings. The first is that our girls believe that public accounts have for the most part, a negative impact on their overall lives. And what they're finding is that they're overly exposed to strangers, unwanted contact by strangers. There's also concerns about their own reputations when they're online. There's quite a bit of numbers of social comparisons happening. The other thing that I wanted to point you out to is that with increasing use of location sharing, things like Snapchat we'll get into, what we find is that our kids are concerned about their own safety. Right. So if imagine this, right? If you have your 8th grade child and they have their location setting on, whether or not they know how to turn that off or not is not the point. But what they find is that when they have their location sharing on, they find a number of things happening. Number one is they understand where their peers are at. So if their peers are collectively in a location and they're not, then they experience some type of anxiety or some type of isolation that's attributed to their own fear of missing out of that experience. The other is their own safety. And it doesn't take me long to sort of see that there's cases upon cases where kids are looking for one another in spaces and are often using social media platforms to find one another to do a number of things with them. So hopefully I'm not starting to scare you, but I do want to make sure that I point out this last study, which is um, when our kids are exposed to things that are inappropriate, oftentimes that means things that we're not ready to have conversations about. And the last research that I want to point out is something that we did at Common Sense last year, which is our kids being exposed to pornography at an earlier age. And what we found is that in the research that we drew, roughly about 73% or a little under 75% reported actually being exposed to pornography either accidentally or on purpose. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, right? Which is if you have not had conversations with your kids about what appropriate relationships should look like online, and then they come across relationships that they perceive to be intimate or connected, and they don't know what to do with that because we put restrictions on them, then we get into all sorts of social and mental sort of issues that we'll draw on. Okay, so if you have still with me, believe me, it gets better after this. So I just want to make sure that you know this. Please don't go in and cry in a corner just quite yet. I'm not going to do that to you all. I want you to understand then that it's a lot more nuanced than what I've just presented. And the reason why it's so nuanced is because there's so many different opportunities that we are seeing where kids are navigating these spaces to benefit themselves and their peers. There's also dangers, right? And so I want to make sure that I close our digital landscape with providing you with some perspective, a chance for you to understand both what those opportunities or benefits are, and also what challenges that you should be aware of. The first is, and I'm going to do this by the platforms that we see at Common Sense. If you're not aware of them, when we do share the deck, you will be, the link at the very top there will give you an overview of each of the platforms. I think most of you will know most of the 3 platforms that I share. The first is the platform Be Real. This is a platform that has attempted to normalize and create authentic connections with their peers. The idea here is that kids are notified at random hours of the day, and their peers are able to take the notification enables them to take photos of themselves without any filters. And they have 2 minutes to prepare their photos. At which point they the platform will take a picture of the selfie as well as the rear camera, and that is exactly what they are. There's no filters attributed to that. That is what the child is, sort of where their child is at that point. The challenge with that is, while it's beneficial to be authentic with your friends without having to curate so much content and work on your personality or your selfies, the challenge is that it can also negatively impact the amount of time kids are actually spending curating in the moment. So if you're anything like myself, where it just takes you forever to get ready, for kids that have less than 2 minutes, you'd be surprised the anxiety that sort of builds up around that time. The next platform I want to kind of just briefly share is the platform Twitch. These are platforms where these are spaces, as well as a platform that showcases gaming skills and enables the viewer to kind of view what's happening so they learn their own gaming skills. Really nice, right? So if you have a child that likes the game, Twitch is a really interesting platform where they can share and learn new tactics on how to play the game effectively. Who knows, they might be able to meet new friends in these spaces for those kids. The challenge is these are also places, and these also are spaces where kids often come across inappropriate content. right? So teaching our child what to do when they come across that, as we'll point out shortly, is really what's needed, right? The third, I think we're all familiar with, is TikTok. If you're not familiar with it, these are a platform that enables the users to share and create videos. Again, an opportunity, right? If a child wants to express themselves, this is a really interesting way to do so. In addition to dancing, there's recipes. There's so many unique ways. I saw one this past week where a child was teaching other kids, a middle school child was teaching his users, his fan base, how to volunteer and how do you get your volunteer hours and time. So recording himself doing things like picking up trash, helping homeless, so on and so forth. Really interesting kind of videos. It's not all doom and gloom on these spaces. These are also spaces where our kids, though, are come across digital drama or issues that they may not know how to interpret. If you're not familiar with this, this is most recently, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we saw an uptick in the number of students viewing fights, their school fights. So hashtag whatever your school was and fights associated with that. And so again, if you're on the call thinking, I'm going to get rid of every platform, Jamie, and I want to, put my child and myself in a closet for the next 20 years, then good luck with that, right? That's a really, I sometimes feel that way as a parent, but we need to kind of know that these are spaces where our kids are wanting to connect with. These are spaces where social experiences happen. And these are also spaces where we as parents need to reinforce our values. So, all right, enough of that. Let me ask you all now to think about your own values. So I'm going to ask you a very basic question now before moving to perspectives, and that is, what are the ways moving forward? And a really great entry point for you all to have conversations this evening is to think about this. Given the platform features and given your own family's values, ask yourself this question, which is, moving forward, now that you understand a little bit about the digital landscape, how will you allow your child, or what will you allow your child to do within the following cases? Will you allow your child moving forward to engage with adults in virtual spaces? And if the answer is yes, then we need to teach them how, right? Secondly, are you allowing your child to record themselves, record others, maybe without their permission? If the answer is no, then we need to teach those skills on what that actually looks like. Are you allowing your child to feel overwhelmed when they're constantly having to be on? Right? If you're like saying, Jamie, I don't know what being on means. It means being overly consumed by digital media, that there's anxiety being built into that. And then finally, examples like, are you allowing your child to respond to others online in an online platform, such as a text message or Snapchat or any of these platforms, when they feel angry or upset? Now, I can easily tell you, don't do this, but only you know your child best. Only you know how to navigate them. But the question and the call to action here is very simple, which is bring your own values and your skill sets to these platforms and then interrupt what exactly your kids are doing in these spaces. All right, take a moment now to just reflect on some of the practices in your own child's life and what values you set forth in terms of how you want to interrupt their engagements online. Also take a moment to breathe, because I just overwhelmed you with so much content. All right, let's get into this now. Sabrina, you ready for this? Yeah.
I am ready.
All right, what I'm going to do now is I've essentially given you a landscape. I've given you an opportunity to reflect on your own practices. Now we want to normalize it into how this actually plays out, what this looks like, what we're seeing, and how we might have a pathway or guide to support our connections with students. And with me today is Sabrina Robertson. Sabrina, I'm just going to ask you if you don't mind unmuting and share a little bit about yourself. And then if you can, share a little bit about the organization that you represent, COPE.
Absolutely. So my name is Sabrina Robertson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have been working with children and families for about 25 years now. One of the places that I get to do that is at COPE, which is an amazing nonprofit organization in Walnut Creek. And COPE stands for Counseling Options for Parent Education. So COPE is an organization that literally is committed to supporting parents as they support their children and build healthy families. We do that a number of ways, one of which is through parent education, which is parenting classes, seminars, and counseling.
Thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate it. I just want to get into it because I know families are dying to kind of hear this. First question I have, and I'm sorry if I kind of just like delve into this content really quick, but as an organization, what do you all do to support your kids in their own digital well-being? Can you kind of share some practical advice in what you all do?
Absolutely. Educate, expose and educate. So one of the things that we do is what we're doing tonight. We engage parents in conversation so that we demystify the things that are normal to their children. One of the ways that we do that is even with digital wellness, understanding what exactly digital wellness is. And I don't know if we've defined it in layman terms, but digital wellness is the intentional pursuit of a healthy relationship with technology and interactive media. We want our kids to be balanced and healthy. One of the other things that we encourage parents to hold and understand is that digital media is a part of their children's culture. It's not something they do. It's literally their culture. So when parents try to restrict kids from digital media, what we're restricting them from is their culture. And we're asking them to be abnormal in a space that is normal to them. It's the only normal that they know. And so it's crucial for parents to get involved, to educate themselves, to learn about the current trends. I'm so glad you went over the top apps that are happening right now. And then the other thing is that we want parents to encourage their children to be good, intelligent consumers of media.
Sabrina, I wish I can give my little 8-year-old to you for babysitting purposes. You'd be such a great model, right? But
Yes.
I want to double down on that a little bit because I think sometimes as parents, it's really difficult to have those honest conversations. I find that sometimes parents feel like because they're inadequate or they're not familiar with the technology, that it's difficult to have those conversations, those really challenging conversations. So I wanted to ask you, what is maybe one or two things that you wish parents knew about having those difficult conversations?
The first thing I would want parents to know is that it's okay to not know. And so if they approach with questions and wonder to explore with their children, as opposed to judging them, I think that our kids would be really, really open to teaching them, right? A simple question like, what's the latest challenge? There's always a challenge on TikTok, and some of them are really, really scary, but we won't know unless we ask. What's the latest dance craze? Teach me it. I'm still working on the Tootsie Roll and Superman, but teach me, right? And so if they approach their kids with being open to explore and to learn, our kids will become the teacher.
Can I ask you just in terms of like what that process looks like? Is there
The Tootsie Roll
process? Oh no, the Tootsie Roll I got. It's pretty easy on that piece. How do they have that though, given sort of the trends, given, the need for families to set restrictions, what exactly are those like practical steps that you think they should share? I know that you shared sort of being attentive and being prepared, but are there others that you think families can take away saying, I'm going to do this starting tomorrow as a way to have those difficult conversations with my child?
Absolutely. So I think that one of the things that parents can do is to take a step back and breathe, right? Understand that they are their children's best teacher when they're in a good, healthy place themselves. One of the things that we want parents to understand is to communicate to their children that most successful websites, apps, and games are designed to be addictive. Like, let's just pull the cover off of that, right? And so as we begin to talk to kids about it, let's discuss the common traps that are associated with these individual apps, right? And from there, they can go with identifying what does responsible usage look like. This should be a collaborative conversation so that kids have a voice in the conversation as well. And from there, they can start talking about rules, right? Such as when do we use it? How do we use it? I love what you talked about, the consequences for using it, and then have some what if conversations, right? One of the largest challenges right now on TikTok is stealing Hondas and Kias, those two cars. And they just steal them for the purpose of joyriding and taking pictures. And that may look really cool, but I would ask my child, what if that was our car? What if we woke up and we couldn't go to school? We couldn't go to work. Like, you couldn't go to your play date. How would that feel? And then normalizing that, because that's what's happening to somebody's family, and we're looking at it as entertainment. So having those real conversations with them, and then talking about, what do you think is reasonable amount of usage, and negotiating from there.
I really appreciate that, Sabrina. And I think it just, you're getting into my last question, which is really, are there one or two or even three things in addition to having those conversations around empathy that you think parents could have so they set their child up for success?
Talk to them about staying safe. Spend time with them together online. And then also give them things to do. Balance is everything, right? So give them opportunities to earn online time by doing other things that don't reflect online usage, right? We're going to go outside. We're going to spend quality time at the park. We're going to do some other things so that they have a broader sense of what life really is, right? That also teaches them time management. It teaches them so many other skills that'll be helpful as they continue to grow. Okay.
Thanks, Sabrina. That's really helpful. I noted a few others that you had mentioned before. And so I don't know if you want to either add on to this slide piece, but I just, you're filled with such great knowledge. So any other highlights that you'd like to connect on?
Well, just the middle one, encourage them to come to you if they encounter a problem, whether it's cyberbullying, whether it's unwanted contact. Just leave space for, even if they violate a rule, that if they get in trouble, they can come to you.
Whew. All right. I'm still taking you up for a potential child sitting at some point, just because I think you can definitely give my child some framing for sure as a whole.
Absolutely. We'll have lots of fun while we do it.
Let's transition a little bit. Thank you so much, Sabrina. So we heard again for how you can do this and what are some very specific techniques you can have as a parent. And sometimes the challenge here, though, is sometimes we realize that our kids are at school for half the time. And so we need to be better thought partners and partners with our schools. And so what we're going to hear now is a perspective from a school. And what we're going to do is provide sort of a district insight. What are schools seeing? How are schools looking at issues around digital misuse? And what you as parents should know in terms of partnering with schools to support your child online. And with me is Miss Lori. Hi, Miss Lori. How are you? Miss Lori Roberts, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
It's great to see you. Would you mind unmuting and letting the audience know where you're from? I know where you're from, obviously, the role that you played at West Contra Costa, and maybe a little bit about yourself as well.
All right. Thank you. I also just want to say, wow, Sabrina, it's going to be tough following you. And can I just answer all my questions by saying what Sabrina said? But my name's Laurie Roberts, and I'm the Ed Tech coordinator in West Contra Costa Unified School District, so the watery side of Contra Costa County. And I have actually been with the district for 27 years. I started as a classroom teacher. I started as a kindergarten teacher, actually, and then I was an instructional coach. I've been a teacher on special assignment. And then most recently, I became an administrator and took on the coordinator role. So I have held a lot of different jobs and been all over the school district. So I know it quite well. And if you don't know where West Contra Costa Unified is, it's basically Richmond, all along the 80 corridor, all the way to Hercules. So it's all those towns in between as well. We have over 50 schools.
Wow. Well, Laura, I've known you for a long time. And one of the things that I really appreciate and admire about you is your ability to understand the whole child and the whole family and take in all of those values and all those culture norms that come with being a family in those engagements. And I know that sometimes it's often very difficult to translate that from a tech point of view, knowing that there's standards that have to be covered and there's devices that have to be issued. So I do want to ask you, which is, what are the things that you think happen or the district does, both at West Contra Costa and in other districts that you've seen? What do they do to ensure that the student use of technology is done in a safe manner?
Great. Well, I do want to share that in West Contra Costa, we are a one-to-one Chromebook district. So every single one of our students has a Chromebook that it differs from grade to grade level, but most of our kids are taking those home with them. So this, of course, has opened up certain issues. But this is how we're keeping them safe, actually. And one of the things, actually, if you could go to the next slide, I have some. So a couple of things going on here. We basically put into place certain blockages, certain barriers, certain gates for students. But what ends up happening, and this is really quite the cycle that we go through on the regular. So there are barriers that are put in place to keep our students safe. We have students we have really smart students who figure out how to get around those things. So what that means then is that we have to move those barriers and move those gates. And not only that, but the issues that come up are different every single year. It used to be, I remember back in the day where most parents were really worried about predators, right? Online predators. Of course, we are still worried about online predators, but on top of that, right, we have, now we have social media issues. We have the fights like you were talking about earlier. We have students who are breaking the law in different ways. But not only that, we also have cyberbullying. So these are all things that we have to keep in mind. So we're constantly moving these barriers around or figuring out where the holes are so that we can keep our children safe. And a big part of this is on the Chromebooks, actually. If something is blocked on the Chromebook when they're at school, that same thing is blocked at home because they're on a school device. So that's kind of the physical way of looking at blocks. So, content filters, we're talking about, Child Internet Protection Act compliance. But then I want to talk for a minute about what we do about the soft filter, which is the brain. How are we working with our students so that they have their own filters, so that they know, right, that there's someone at the school and there's someone at home that they can go to if they see something that that isn't right? I'm calling this the dual filter development because we're always developing those physical barriers, but we're also working with our students with things like digital citizenship, media literacy, in order to go ahead and build that filter that is their brains. So again, that's how we're trying to keep our kids safe. Of course, things are constantly changing and we are trying to keep track of that as well as we can.
And what I really liked about your statement just now is it echoes what Sabrina shared about, building and understanding a little bit of empathy, both from kind of how these platforms or these like restrictions are made out, but also what it is that our kids are doing in these spaces and how to teach those skills.
Right.
So for the parent on the call, Lori, I wanted to really ask you, what have you found to be successful sort of ways or cases where parents are communicating their concerns around tech use? And what exactly does that process both look like? And what are ways parents can do that when they see concerns around their kids misusing technology?
Very simply, I always say start with your child's teacher. And the reason for that is a lot of times these issues may look like something that is like an issue with something going on with another student in the class or another student at the school. But really, these are larger issues that my department wants to know about. And we're over the whole district. But we do want to hear these issues because these are something that we need to consider when, again, we're talking about these building up the filter and moving the barriers, things like that. We really want you to talk to the teacher first. The teacher oftentimes, and we just recently had a situation where a student was using a classroom desktop computer and had figured out the way around the filters. Because they're smart, I'm telling you, they're smarter than we are. But So she had figured that out, and the parent found out and contacted the principal. So maybe had possibly spoken to the teacher first, but oftentimes then the principals know to come to us if the question is a little bit bigger than something that they think just they can deal with. So I really think that it's important to talk to the teacher, because the teacher wants to know too. Having been a classroom teacher, I know that I would have wanted to know.
And have you found a certain way to do that works better than others in terms of the channel or medium? Just does an email work? Does just like calling the school just for families that want to talk about tech?
I think an email works great.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if your district is offering any kind of parent education around this, take advantage of it. I want to thank all of you who are here today. Just thank you for taking the time out to be here, because that says a lot. That really says a lot about who you are as a parent.
Yeah, kudos to that. I agree with you. Let me close with just this last question. And I started with this, which is an attempt to not demonize technology, but rather to understand the benefits and the challenges associated with our kids using that.
Right.
Can you kind of give some insight on what parents should be aware of in terms of where they find that balance?
Right.
Where benefits and challenges kind of like where's that sweet spot, right, for educating our kids in the digital space?
I first want to say that that is a rough place to find at all times. And I'm saying this as the mom of two kids who are now, I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. So, you know, it is really tough to see what the positives are. But I know for a fact that they are there. And I know that because of my own use of technology, right? But I just want to share that it's really important to have the mindset that this is not whack-a-mole. I'm dating myself now by saying it's not whack-a-mole. So if you go to the next, yeah, there's the whack-a-mole. So those of you who are into that, sometimes it feels like it, right? There's a problem, you whack the mole. There's another problem over there, you got to whack the mole, right? And it just feels like you're constantly doing this. But if you have those conversations with your students, with your kids, and you know what's going on, you open up those conversations and you show that you're curious. A lot of times our parents don't know, but the kids do. And oftentimes if you ask your student, hey, can you show me that? Just like what Sabrina said, can you show me that? Can you tell me about that? They will gladly do that, because man, let me tell you, it's really fun to teach your parent, right? So I just think it's really important to have that mindset of it's not whack-a-mole, right? You don't have to be constantly putting out that next fire. Instead, try to be a little more proactive and have those conversations with your students.
That's really helpful. Sabrina, any closing thoughts, and just hearing Lori, any sort of just closing thoughts in terms of like what parents after this session or after this workshop can actually do with their kids to start this process? I know both of you mentioned some really great tips, but are there, like, how do I get started, right? When I think about these, like this overwhelming topic or theme, any closing thoughts that you might have?
For sure. I love the idea of a reset. I love the idea of having a family meeting and saying, you know what, we've approached this way in the past, but we want to do it differently now, and inviting our kids to partner with us. Right? I don't know what I don't know. I'm inviting you to teach me. I want to work collaboratively together so that we are on the same side of the table as opposed to the tug of war on the other side.
I completely agree. Very nicely said. I want to just close before we get into questions or even next steps. Maybe an acronym that might help folks on the call today. We think a lot about kind of what are the components or the areas that you should be aware of. And I might sort of use this acronym of MEALS. The idea is that you want to just start with yourself, right? If you are modeling those behaviors and you're modeling effective communication skills online, your kids will see that. And if your kids are older or younger, or if they don't believe you, or if you've been a hypocrite, today's your day to reset. I feel like one of those like self-help gurus, but hopefully I'm not, everyone. This idea is like, recognize your own vulnerabilities and recognize where you stand in that space, and be different if you are are not adhering to the same values that that you like your kids to adhere to online. And the second is, and I think Lori really pointed this out, and that is, and Sabrina echoed that a lot, and that is like, find ways to engage and have conversations with your kids around these issues. Again, you don't have to be the expert at these platforms, but you should be an expert on how your kids are navigating these platforms by being curious, by empathizing, by understanding the landscape. The third is really adjust those experiences. If you find that those online experiences don't support your kids' interest, be able to adjust what that looks like, not only for the algorithm that your kids may or may not be viewing or be a part of, but rather because we want to diversify what it is that our kids are seeing online so they get a broader experience when they're online or in these spaces. I'm hardly ever discuss the idea of limits because that is such a dominant sort of narrative when it comes to technology use. But I will give you this really non-negotiable, and this is just studies upon studies that reinforce this, and that is ensuring that your kid's device is put away at least 90 minutes, or every device, I should say, 90 minutes before bed. There's quite a bit of studies related and associated with the correlation of sleep deprivation on quite a number of things. And so we want to be able to understand when to put that device away. If that is the most difficult thing for you to do, then again, just reset. And then the final piece is we really want to be there for our kids. And this goes without saying. And if I would have ran a workshop in person, I'd have you all shout all the beautiful things that your kids or your grandkids do online. But the idea is that we want to ensure that our kids are turning to us when they're experiencing some type of drama or stressor, and leaving, as Sabrina pointed out, those channels of communication open. So to that, I say thank you. And I'll turn it over to Nick to have any closure before we take any final questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie. So I just want to go back to the thing that you said, Jamie, right at the beginning when you were going through the 3 platforms, the TikTok, Be Real, and Twitch. And you were going on the fact that each of these share some combination of opportunity and challenge that's associated with each of these platforms. And so I think the takeaway that I walk away from this evening with is that in the big picture, like, this is all complex. It's complicated, and it's nothing is wholly good or bad. But more often than not, the answer is really learning on how to better model the values that we hold as families, and then the ability to learn how to communicate really, really well with the young people in our lives, communicate vulnerably, communicate often, and being willing to like constantly iterate and adjust as the technology continues to iterate and adjust. I just want to say to everybody, we're so fortunate to have resources right here in our community. On the slide deck, you'll have access to a link that'll take you to COPE's website and to Common Sense's website. And both of those are extraordinary resources filled with tools that you can start using today and tomorrow to do a better job with this and feel more empowered and prepared moving forward. And then on top of that, we each have our own school districts, our own school sites, and our own local educational agencies that care so deeply about this work and who are looking to partner with parents to make sure that you feel supported. So please leverage them as well. I just want to say thanks so much to Jamie for facilitating this evening's conversation, to Sabrina and to Lori for their willingness to share their expertise late into the afternoon. I want to thank Steve and Mike Becker for all of the work that happened behind the scenes with the technology and the organizing of the event. So thanks so much to Steve and Mike, and then to Superintendent Mackey for support of the event, as well as just being a champion for all of our education communities in Contra Costa County. I think there will be some time. If you have questions, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So if you'd like to drop a question or two in there, that's fine. Maybe, Steve, we could turn off the recording now. And we have a few minutes where we can do questions. Thank you all so much for spending a little bit of time with us this evening.